You are about to meet the biggest mass murderer in the history of the world. He was more horrible than Adolf Hitler, who killed almost 12 million people, and King Leopold II, who caused the death of over 15 million Africans.
Nung pumunta ako for the first time sa China, at si Chairman Mao, hindi lamang kumamay sa akin, hinalikan pa ang kamay ko. Nagulat ako. Sabi ko, why did you do that? Chairman, sabi niya, because I admired you for so long. Because when you became First Lady, the first project you had was culture. You were attacked and you were subjected to many negative things.
This Chinese leader was so horrible, researchers say he might have killed up to 100 million people. But how did he manage to kill 8 times more people than Hitler? And crazily, how is China still seeing this monster as a hero? This is the story of Mao Zedong.
On Saturday morning, Mrs. Marcos paid homage to the memory of Chairman Mao Zedong. The long lines of Chinese and foreigners stand four abreast in Tiananmen Square, awaiting their turn to enter the mausoleum to view the remains of China's great leader.
Di pa talaga opisyal na national hero itong si Jose Rizal. Ayon sa National Commission for Culture and the Arts, wala pa raw kasing batas o executive order na nagsasabing siya nga ay ating pangbansang bayani.
Sa state banquet, pinuri pa ni si Duterte at ikinumpara siya kay Rizal.
Fei Shang, Gao Xin, Qi, Xi Xiang, Zhuang Hu, Guo Jia, Zhu Xi, Xi Jinping, Zhuang Hu Zhu, Fei Lupin, Bashir, Wang Xilian, Ho, 20, Zhuang Hu, Jin Yi Rali.
Mrs. Marcos brought a wreath of flowers to lay at the marble statue of the man she met on 2 unforgettable occasions in his lifetime.
Zhu 20, Zhuang Hu Ren, Guo Qing Huaila. Happy National Day to the People's Republic of China. 谢谢大家。高行期吉祥庄户国家主席习近平庄户主菲律宾大学王金莲和问题庄户公民致力管理清楚中华人民共和国成立73周年June 20中国人国庆快乐 Happy National Day to the People's Republic of China 谢谢大家
China cannot find a greater champion than my mother in the Philippines. Perhaps we will continue what President Duterte has started, what has been described as an independent foreign policy. And this is what we feel is best in the national interest. And I think it is to be advantageous not only to our friends in China, but to all our friends around the world. We look forward to continuing fostering this relationship, making it stronger, making it deeper, and to the advantage of our two great countries.
But you continued to finish the cultural center. You know, Mrs. Marcos, China, sabi niya ganyan, was united not by the gun. Doon kami nagkaisa sa cultural revolution. Kaya tama yung iyong layunin para sa bayan. Kaya tama yung iyong layunin para sa bayan.
Sa state banquet, pinuri pa ni Si Duterte at ikinumpara siya kay Rizal.
Duterte is the best recruiter of the CPP and the NPA.
Mitsuhin ako ng pure Chinese. Mga brother, ang lolo ko Chinese, may Chinese wife doon, yung Chinese second wife dito. I am a member of Bayan.
But you continued to finish the cultural center. You know, Mrs. Marcos, China, sabi niya ganyan, was united not by the gun. Kaya tuwan-tuwa nga ako. Mula nun, lalo naman lumakas ang loob ko.
He was a communist leader and the founder of People's Republic of China. His heartless killing started in 1949. He wanted to own the rich land of China's neighbor, Tibet. So he sent the military to invade the peaceful country. Because of his greed, the Chinese brutal forces have killed millions of Tibetans and jailed thousands more. But Mao's hunger for power didn't end here. He also ordered to murder millions of Chinese people who opposed his beliefs. Mao didn't care if you're a scholar, a mother, or a father. As long as you support the nationalist ideas, you will be killed. His desire to silence his critics had gone so far to the point that he formed groups of students with a task to abuse and humiliate his political enemies. But in 1966, these students fought within themselves, and Mao couldn't control them anymore, so he ordered the police to intervene, which ended in a massacre of millions of students and police officers.
Kaya tama yung iyong layunin para sa bayan. Doon kami nagkaisa sa cultural revolution. Sa cultural revolution. Doon kami nagkaisa. Kaya tama yung iyong layunin para sa bayan.
I am a member of Bayan.
Tell the president, I said, what he has done to me, I have already forgiven. And I have already forgotten. I have no bitterness against Mr. Marcos. I have no rancor against Mr. Marcos. All I want to do is to help our people stop this bloodshed. So please tell the president, I said, I have a formula. In 2 days, I said, I will be sending him a formula. And I wrote this formula, a secret formula I sent to Mr. Marcos, and I said, we should legalize the Communist Party of the Philippines and give them exactly the same forum to expound on their ideas. And this is a possible breakthrough.
Shall I tell you that we almost turned communists because you refused to recognize us? Shall I tell you that I had a difficult time stopping my guerrillas, 25,000 of them from joining the communists?
We should legalize the Communist Party of the Philippines and give them exactly the same forum to expound on their
It's not just Mao's disgusting greed that made him the most heartless leader in history. He also created horrible policies that literally killed. Just look at his land reform campaign that killed way over 4 million Chinese landowners. The program was so poorly regulated that it somehow entitled the poor to kill their landlords and take their land.
By constitutional mandate, social justice is a matter of national policy and a priority objective of government. And this is why one of the first reforms was land reform. Now, we established land reform. We were fighting a group known as the Hukbalahap, Hukbong Nagpapalaya ng Bayan. It was socialist inclined. It was leftist. But they were friends of mine because we had fought in the Second World War together. And so I approached them and I said, look, I'm going to establish land reform. If you're fighting for land reform against the feudalistic agrarian system, then you must join me. And they did. I want to introduce to you the leader of that rebellion, who is now present and is a part of the government, Mr. Luis Tarok. When you have activists like Luis Tarok and Jerry Montemayor and Nilo Tayag and these men who were ready to kill the president, but who now says that the reforms that are being instituted are for the good and welfare of the country, you don't.
Sa state banquet, pinuri pa ni Si Duterte at ikinumpara siya kay Rizal.
Duterte is the best recruiter of the CPP and the NPA.
President-elect Marcos hailed what he noted as the great gains from the Philippines' relationship with China. He said he looks forward to more fruitful engagements in the two countries' friendship.
His misguided industrialization efforts were even more problematic. They started the deadliest famine in history, where 40 million children, women and men have starved to death. Zedong also expanded the Chinese prison systems. His heartless rule turned prisoners into working machines. They were forced to work 14 hours a day without rest. The result? Almost 20 million people died of tiredness, dehydration and disgusting living conditions. And now, after everything I said, here is the shocking fact. Despite millions of innocent deaths and families waiting for justice, Mao Zedong is still considered as an icon of pride in China until today. His face is still honored under money. His giant portrait still hangs in pride on one of China's city entrances. His embalmed body is still being visited by hundreds of people every day. How can this admiration still be possible? I mean, we are talking about a ruthless man who not just massacred innocent people, but also killed millions from his own Chinese race. Well, the uncomfortable truth is that China's government is deliberately hiding Mao Zedong's dark secrets in their history. Kids don't learn about it. His wicked ways were not included in Chinese textbooks. Documents of his crimes were destroyed, stolen, or kept in secret by government librarians. Through the years, China's government has been harassing anyone who studies Mao's horrific leadership. Historians cannot sell their books in China, their calls are being monitored by the state, and their social media accounts are regularly deleted. This is a full Chinese censorship.
Doon kami nagkaisa sa Cultural Revolution. Kaya tama yung iyong layunin para sa bayan.
Sa gitna naman ng agawan sa teritoryo, kinikilala sa isang lungsod sa China ang ating bayani na si Dr. Jose Rizal.
Ayon sa lokal na pamahalaan, sa mahigit 1 milyong Chinese na nasa Pilipinas ngayon, karamihan ay may ancestral roots sa Xinjiang. Kasama na rito ang ilang business tycoon kagaya ni Lucio at Henry C.
In another case, I was reporting corruption in the Philippines. $900 million worth of money that should have gone to fight poverty in the Philippines instead went to a corrupt man, Lucio, who was in default on his loans. Philippine National Bank went into default. There was a run on the bank.
That is how, until today, this monster is being portrayed as someone else, a hero, an icon of equality. And this is exactly why Project Nightfall is committed to expose the dark secrets of history. Because we believe that only when we open our eyes to the horrors of the past, that we will be able to see the lies in the present and prevent these horrible things from happening again.
非常高兴及希望中国国家主席习近平、中国驻菲律宾大使王锡良和20中国公民致力大力庆祝中华人民共和国成立73周年。
On Thursday, July 12th, of human settlement, third visit to China, mission accomplished and vision fulfilled.
Happy National Day
For her journey to China in 1979, elected a friendship between two nations, a firm bonding, the growing and deepening relationship.
I am happy to report that we return from this, my third visit to the People's Republic of China, with another mission accomplished. From the very beginning, it was clear that the Chinese government attached the highest importance to this visit. We were accorded high honors and an exceedingly warm welcome.
Upon Mrs. Marcos's arrival in Peking on July 6, the brief but warm welcome demonstrated the high esteem of the Chinese government for the First Lady. Top Chinese officials led by Vice Premier Li Shenzhen and his wife, Madame Lin Jiamei, members of the diplomatic corps, and Philippine embassy officials were on hand for the airport ceremony. Immediately after arrival, Mrs. Marcos and her official party, accompanied by Vice Premier Li Shenzhen, who was to serve as her official host for the visit, were taken to the State Guest House, a beautiful villa in the outskirts of Peking. The official delegation from the Philippines represented all the branches of government, with 3 cabinet ministers, Minister of Tourism, then Minister of Industry, Vicente Paterno, and Minister of Budget, Jaime Laya, as well as the Chairman of the Philippine Airlines, Roman Cruz Jr., 2 Justices of the Supreme Court, Justice Claudio T. Hanqui and Justice Jovenel Guerrero, and 14 members of the Batasang Pambansa, local government officials, and businessmen. The State Guest House is situated in a lovely estate with carefully tended gardens. The complex was built in 1959 on the 10th anniversary of the People's Republic of China. Villa number 18, where Mrs. Marcos stayed, is normally reserved only for visiting heads of state. It is the largest and the best of all the guest houses in the estate and holds priceless art pieces crafted by palace artisans during the time of the imperial dynasties. That same afternoon, Mrs. Marcos met with Chairman Hua Kuo-feng, Premier of the State Council of the People's Republic of China, and Chairman of the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party. It was an unprecedented gesture that she was received by the Chief of State barely 2 hours after her arrival. Their 65-minute conversation took place at the East Hall of the Great Hall of the People. Mrs. Marcos handed a personal letter of President Marcos to the chairman.
In response to President Marcos' invitation, Premier Hua Kuo-feng promised to come to the Philippines early next year, and we look forward to his visit with keen anticipation.
That evening, a state banquet was tendered in her honor at the Great Hall of the People. In his speech, Vice Premier Li Shenyan praised Mrs. Marcos for her work as an envoy of goodwill, promoting the friendship between China and the Philippines.
Madam Marcos is visiting China for the first time as an envoy of goodwill sent by the Filipino government and the people. With her consistent interest in promoting friendship between China and the Philippines, she has contributed positively to the development of friendly relations and cooperation between the two countries. Since the establishment of diplomatic relations, she herself received many Chinese delegations, all made arrangements for their stay in the Philippines. And it was at her suggestion and with her help that many goodwill missions from the Philippines visited China.
He remembered his visit to the Philippines in March 1978 as an opportunity to enhance the mutual understanding and friendship of the two countries.
During my visit to the Philippines in March last year, I was given a ceremonious and warm welcome by President and Madam Marcos and the Filipino people.
Mrs. Marcos responded in kind with the remembrance of her China visit in 1974 and again in 1975.
It was a mission of rediscovery, the rediscovery of an old friend from whom we had for too long been separated. I came back in 1975 to accompany President Marcos' historic voyage, during which new foundations for the friendship between our peoples and a new relationship between our governments were established. Today, I have returned to China to help sustain and nurture our friendship and to reaffirm the common desire of both our peoples that the friendly relations between them continue to grow and to prosper. But to me, a journey to China is more than a visit to a friend and a neighbor. It is an act of self-renewal, a pilgrimage to one of the wellsprings of our culture, a return to one of the sources of our national heritage.
The following day, Mrs. Marcos was to confer even longer with Vice Premier Li Xianyan and later with Vice Premier Deng Xiaoping. It was the first meeting of Mrs. Marcos with Vice Premier Deng at the Xinjiang Hall of the Great Hall of the People. Deng was the official escort to President Marcos on the latter's visit to China in June 1975. That afternoon, he told Mrs. Marcos that he had very good memories of the visit by President Marcos.
We had several unusually long, serious discussions with Their Excellencies Deng Xiaoping and Li Xianyan, both of them Vice Premiers of the State Council and Vice Chairman of the Communist Party of the People's Republic of China. From them, we obtained a deeper understanding of China's position on regional and global issues and the urgent questions that confront us in Southeast Asia. Vice Premier Deng Xiaoping volunteered to declare that China was committed to stand by the Philippines should our security be threatened. At the same time, I believe that our conversations with China's leaders gave them a clearer understanding of our situation here in the Philippines and the problems that we face as a people.
The Filipino Assemblyman paid a courtesy call on Vice Premier Nguyen Ngawang Jimmy of the NPC Standing Committee. Chairman Cruz met with top officials of the Civil Aviation Administration of China, Deputy Director of CAAC Zhen To, and First Deputy Director General Shang Ruiai, who initialed the air agreement on his visit to Manila in June. Minister Jaime Laya, Commissioner of the Budget, exchanged views with a leading member of the State Planning Committee, Deputy Commissioner Ruan Yun, as did Minister Paterno with the Foreign Trade Minister Li Qiang and other officials of the Trade Ministry.
They too have formed new bonds with the Chinese leadership and people. It is personal bonds like this which strengthen the relations between countries and peoples. As a noble gesture of understanding and friendship, China's leaders agreed to help us meet our urgent need for additional supplies of high-quality oil and refined petroleum products, which are badly needed by our farmers, fishermen, jeepney drivers, and all of our people.
Mrs. Marcos took over negotiations begun earlier by separate technical panels on the 4 major agreements to be concluded and signed during her visit. Her visit on Sunday morning with the widow of Zhou Enlai touched memories. The wife of the late premier serves in her own right as a member of China's top leadership. She received Mrs. Marcos in her home on a government estate outside Peking. Mrs. Marcos brought gifts from home, special mementos of Philippine craftsmanship.
But you continued to finish the cultural center. You know, Mrs. Marcos, China, sabi niya ganyan, was united not by the gun. Doon kami nagkaisa sa cultural revolution. Kaya tama yung iyong layunin para sa bayan.
Mrs. Marcos had of course met the late Premier Zhou Enlai, and so her visit now could not but evoke a nostalgic remembrance of a revered man who had played a major role in the historic transformation of the country. There was one other great man to be remembered. On Saturday morning, Mrs. Marcos paid homage to the memory of Chairman Mao Zedong. The long lines of Chinese and foreigners stand four abreast in Tiananmen Square, awaiting their turn to enter the mausoleum to view the remains of China's great leader. The memorial hall was opened in September of 1977, the first anniversary of his death. It stands as a massive monument of the Chinese people's awe and reverence for the revolutionary hero. The mausoleum had been built with contributions from all the different regions of the country by way of materials and labor. Inside the second chamber, Chairman Mao's body lies encased in a glass sarcophagus, dressed in the revolutionary gray tunic famed all over the world and draped with the red and gold flag of the Republic. Mrs. Marcos brought a wreath of flowers to lay at the marble statue of the man she met on two unforgettable occasions in his lifetime. Over the largest children's palace in Peking, in Coal Hill Park, which used to be imperial gardens in the Yin, Ming, and Qing dynasties. In 1956, the park was converted into a special playground and study center where talented children are given training and supervised in extracurricular activities after school hours. Every day, some 2,000 children come to the center for play or for study. The ancient pavilions are now used as classrooms for special lessons in calligraphy, fine arts, dancing, and music. The signing of the agreements on the eve of her departure and the high point of the visit took place in a spirit of exultation and triumph. Embodied in the oil agreement was China's pledge to supply the Philippines with crude oil, including higher grade oil on a stable basis over at least the next 7 years, and to give the Philippines priority as China's oil supplies increase. The agreement on long-term trade, on the other hand, provides for the purchase by China of larger volumes of Philippine sugar, copper concentrate, and coconut oil in return for China's petroleum. The total value of Philippine trade with China is expected to reach $2 billion from 1979 to 1985. The trade agreement lays the basis for other forms of economic cooperation, including the establishment of joint ventures between Filipino corporations and Chinese organizations. An example would be the forthcoming projects for Philippine corporations to build, manage, and operate hotels in China. The air agreement promises still closer links between Filipinos and Chinese, facilitating their visits with one another as Philippine Airlines and the Civil Aviation Administration of China connect the cities of Manila, Canton, and Peking with twice weekly flights. And recognizing the importance of culture in international relations, a cultural agreement would serve to structure the extensive forms of cultural exchange undertaken in recent years and in the future. In short, the agreements on trade, oil, air, hotel, construction and culture fulfill the expressed desire of both countries for more trade and cultural contacts and mark the beginning of a more dynamic and expansive partnership between the two nations. North Korean ambassador to Peking, Jong Myung-soo, had coursed a request through Philippine ambassador Narciso Reyes to be permitted to hand personally to the First Lady a letter of invitation to visit Pyongyang. In the evening of the banquet, the North Korean envoy reiterated to the First Lady his government's desire to establish diplomatic relations with the Philippines without having to break Philippine diplomatic relations with South Korea. The farewell banquet given by Mrs. Marcos on Sunday evening reflected a mood of exuberance felt by both Filipino and Chinese guests. Cultural numbers by Filipino and Chinese artists enlivened the evening, and the sentiments expressed by Vice Premier Lee Hsien-yuen and Madam Marcos centered on the deepening of mutual understanding and the affirmation of a common purpose.
Everybody to please join, because we believe that two nations who sing together will stay.
伟大领袖毛主席指引我们向前进。我爱北京天安门，天安门上太阳升。伟大领袖毛主席指引我们向前进。
我爱北京天安门，天安门上太阳升。伟大领袖毛主席为我们向前行。我爱北京天安门，天安门上太阳升。伟大领袖毛主席为我们向前进。伟大领袖毛主席给我们向前进。
May we ask everybody to please join Because we believe that two nations who sing together will stay together.
现在请大家跟我们一起唱这支歌，因为我们相信，如果两个国家能够一起唱歌的话，一定能够来。
Sa state banquet, pinuri pa ni si Duterte at ikinumpara siya kay Rizal.
Duterte is the best recruiter of the CTP and the NPA.
Itsюhin ako ng pure Chinese. Mga brother, ang lolo ko Chinese, may Chinese wife doon, yung Chinese second wife dito. I am a member of Bayan.
The centuries-old relationship and friendship of the Philippines and China has been and will continue to be of great mutual benefit to our people.
Saying the occasion should remind Filipinos how their forefathers fought for the freedom they enjoy today.
Sa mga larawang inilabas ng Asia Maritime Transparency Initiative o AMTI noong Disyembre, makikita ang anilay tapos ng itayong mga infrastruktura sa teritoryong inaangkin ng China sa South China Sea, ang Fiery Cross Reef, Subi Reef, Mischief Reef, Tree Island, North Island, Triton Island at Woody Island. Pinapakita raw nito na habang patuloy ang diplomatic outreach ng China sa mga bansa sa Southeast Asia gaya ng Pilipinas, sige naman ito sa pakay na magtayo ng air at naval base. Kaya sabi ni AMTI Director Gregory Poling, dapat manatiling mapagmasid sa ikinikilos ng China.
While the Philippines and everybody else was talking about a code of conduct, China was building bunkers and missile shelters and radar facilities, all of which are meant as a coercive tactic, right? Even if you haven't put the fighter jets in there yet, it's like waving around an empty gun. It's inherently threatening.
Ang pahayag ng Inquirer, nagpakita rin ng litrato ng mga istrukturang ginawa ng China na masasabi raw na pang-militar. Dati nang itinanggi ng China na nagsasagawa ito ng militarisasyon sa South China Sea.
Mahirap na isipin na walang military use yon, dahil unang-una yung buong pagpaplano niyon ay nanggaling sa PLA Navy. We already lost the upper hand kasi nga China has already established strong tactical and operational presence in the South China Sea.
Aminado ang Administrasyong Duterte na binuhay nito ang diplomatic relations sa China na interesadong magpautang sa Pilipinas para sa ilang malalaking infrastructure projects. Tanong sa Malacanang, magsasampa ba ng diplomatic protest ang Pilipinas kontra China?
In the first place, it did not happen overnight. I think the previous administration must have filed also a protest when it became apparent that they were going to be used as military bases. So, what do you want us to say? All that we could do is to extract a promise from China not to reclaim any new artificial islands.
Ganun pa man, ayon kay Banlawi, alas pa rin ng Pilipinas ang desisyon ng UN Arbitral Tribunal pabor.
One of the first reforms was land reform. Now, we established land reform. We were fighting a group known as the Hukbalahap, Hukbong Nagpapalaya ng Bayan. It was socialist inclined. It was leftist. But they were friends of mine because we had fought in the Second World War together. And so I approached them and I said, look, I'm going to establish land reform. If you're fighting for land reform against the feudalistic agrarian system, then you must join me. And they did. I want to introduce to you the leader of that rebellion, who is now present and is a part of the government, Mr. Luis Tarok. When you have activists like Luis Tarok and Jerry Montemayor and Nilo Tayag and these men who were ready to kill the president, but who now says that the reforms that are being instituted are for the good and welfare of the country? You don't.
Sa state banquet, pinuri pa ni si Duterte at ikinumpara siya kay Rizal.
Duterte is the best recruiter of the CTP and the NPA.
Itsюhin ako ng pure Chinese. Mga brother, ang lolo ko Chinese, may Chinese wife doon, yung Chinese second wife dito. I am a member of Bayan.
Kay Rizal, ikinumpara si Duterte, nuri pa ni si Duterte.
Who is this stupid God? Stupido talaga itong putang akong ganun. What do you want me to do? Shoot the Moro or shoot the Christian? Ang lolo ko, Chinese, from Xiamen. I am a member of Bayan. Do not believe the others because they are not my friends. They are my political enemies. They say, I do not believe in God. Who says? I am a believer of a universal minder. But I do not believe in God. I do not believe that a God so perfect would create hell for his creation. What kind of God is he? He is not my God.
What if I told you that the most powerful banking entity in the world was laundering money, and that its corporate bureaucrats go to great lengths to make sure that their illegal activities are never discovered? Well, right now you're probably thinking that's not news, but stay with me here. The World Bank is an international financial institution that's designated to help developing countries by providing loans, all in the name of, quote, reducing global poverty. However, the banking giant has been accused of actually increasing poverty by keeping the third world in perpetual debt and in servitude to the first world. But aside from its obvious critiques, there's also blatant criminal corruption taking place at the highest levels of the financial institution. One woman has risked everything to shed light on this truth. She's exposed information that reveals the extent of the collusion between financial groups and foreign governments. Her name is Karen Hudez. She was senior counsel at the World Bank for 12 years before blowing the whistle. She's joining me now to talk about her experience and what it all means for the rest of us. I'm joined by Karen Hudez. Thank you so much for coming on, Karen.
Thanks for having me.
So could you briefly explain what the impetus was for you to speak out? What did you see?
I was a lawyer and I saw securities fraud. I saw financial information that was not being disclosed to $180 billion worth of bondholders. It was my job to make sure that the financial statements were correct. So first, I reported it up the corporate ladder to the audit committee. When that didn't work, I went to the U.S. Treasury Department. And when that didn't work, I went to the U.S. Congress. Senator Lugar wrote 3 letters to the World Bank saying, don't fire this lady. And they promptly fired me. This means that the U.S. Congress does not have the information that it needs. So they stuck with the problem. After I was fired, 3 senators asked for a GAO inquiry into the corruption that I was reporting at the World Bank. Senators Lugar, Leahy, and Bai.
Walk us through what exactly, where was this money being laundered, to whom?
The money was going every which way because anybody that reported misconduct was fired. So in one case, the borrowers were being overcharged. In another case, I was reporting corruption in the Philippines. $900 million worth of money that should have gone to fight poverty in the Philippines instead went to a corrupt man, Lucio, who was in default on his loans. Philippine National Bank went into default. There was a run on the bank. Philippine National